Hello everyone, and welcome back. In this video, we are going to learn about GraphQL. GraphQL is a Facebook-created querying language which allows us to ask for data from our backends. Generally speaking, it's actually very simple when it comes to the actual top-level view of GraphQL. The part where it gets a little complicated is getting used to the syntax of GraphQL. But first, let's start with the high-level concept of how GraphQL works and then how your front end will interact with a GraphQL backend. To begin, remember, we have our front end and we have our backend server. And as we typically know, with most backends, they usually have these routes that are exposed that allow us to make requests to these routes or endpoints. Those are interchangeable terms, where our front end will make a request to one of these endpoints, let's say to /products. And when we make this request, most likely a GET request, we will get back a response from that endpoint for a list of products. These products will usually come in the format that the backend has them stored in. So if there is an ID, if there is a name, then we'll get all of those properties. Now, if there's more, such as there is a price, there is a currency, then we still will get all of those fields. The backend stores the data. Generally speaking, when it sends back the response, it sends back whatever data the backend wants to send back. Maybe the backend will limit that data, maybe it won't. At the end of the day, the backend is what determines what is inside of that data that you are requesting. This is a very common pattern and has been around for as long as REST APIs have been a thing. This is where GraphQL is different. With GraphQL, instead of having multiple endpoints that you make requests for, there is just one endpoint, the GraphQL endpoint. And with this endpoint, your front end makes a request, but the request will take the form of an object. So technically, you can see it as a GraphQL object or you can see it as a query, but the whole idea is that the front end is going to send in the request a blob that has essentially all of the rules of what it wants from the GraphQL backend. So if we want to query some data, we will send a query request, and the query request will hold the shape of what looks like an object where we will define what we're looking for. Now, let's imagine that in our backend, we had this data set, which was known as collections. And the collections is just all of our products, which is pretty much in our Firebase what our categories is. So let's say we want the collections. We would define, once again, another object shape. And here you would put all of the keys that you want as part of your collections. So let's say we just want the ID and we want the title. What happens now is that GraphQL takes that request shape, that blob essentially, and it will send you back a response where those fields will be the fields in the objects that get sent back to you for what you're asking for. So if we're asking for all the collections and we just say, hey, I just want ID and title, then that's all you're going to get back. You're just going to get back a collection or an array of all of your collection objects, where each object is going to have just the ID and the title. Now, if we want to expand upon this, so let's say we made another request, but this time with the collections, we also want the items inside of it. Now, items is going to point to a different data table in the backend. All you need to know is that the item stores an additional data set where these items also have their own shape. Just as you might expect, we also need to define from the items what properties we want inside of the items. Let's say we want the ID, we want the name, and the price for each of these items. Once again, GraphQL will take that query blob and it will send back where all the collections will have ID, title, and items. But items will come back as an array where the inside values of each item will match the corresponding keys that we passed into the items portion. So we ask for ID, name, and price. We're going to get back ID, name, and price. So this is how GraphQL works. You can, in this sense, be the one on the front end that dictates what kind of data you want from the backend, what shape you want from it, how you want it. It's a lot more powerful for the front end in this manner. At the top level, once again, it's very simple. And for us to actually start interacting with this, we're going to need to actually practice writing inside of this query language because, again, it takes a little getting used to with the syntax. So let's do that in the next video where I have rebuilt the backend for us inside of GraphQL so we can start working with it. I'll see you in the next video.